Today on Teach Me How to Vegan. It speaks to how all of these issues tie into each other.
They all correlate.
And so if anybody goes vegan or switches to a plant-based diet for just one reason,
you're
you
affecting
have all these
the other reasons.
You're affecting all the other reasons, having all these beautiful side effects.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
These very positive side effects because they all coincide and all work together.
Mm-hmm.
The same diet that'll help you lower your cholesterol is the same diet that'll help you save the environment.
Yeah.
Welcome to Teach Me How to Vegan,
a podcast where we explore how to switch to a vegan diet.
I'm Tony, a health educator, fitness instructor, and plant-based eating program manager for Animal Protection of New Mexico.
I'm Mickey, a stay-at-home homeschooling mom and vegan cook who likes to play in the kitchen.
Our family stopped eating meat in 2007.
And we went vegan in 2016. Now we like to share with others what we've learned.
Thanks for joining us.
Let's get started.
Today on Teach Me How to Vegan, the topic is, but why?
But why?
So maybe you're tuning in because you just are interested in why people are switching to plant-based diets, or something about plant-based diets piqued your interest.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're already there and you just want to get a little bit more information, or
you're interested in other people's reasons for going vegan. You might have one or two reasons, and today we're going to explore five.
Right, we're going to explore five main
overarching ideas, and we're only going to touch briefly on some aspects of them. Each one of these topics could be a podcast in and of itself. Each one of these could be a documentary in and of itself. So we're really going to go an inch deep, hopefully a mile wide.
By the end of this episode, you're going to have a wide variety of knowledge as to why people go vegan. You're going to really understand that there's so many reasons. Most people cite the top 3 reasons, or kind of 3 basic reasons people go vegan: for health, for animals, and for the environment. We're going to touch a little bit about how it's so much more complex than that, and why there's so many more reasons.
Yeah, because underneath those 3 sort of main headings, there are, so many subtopics in them. But we're also going to explore social justice and public health aspects of going vegan as well. So we're going to start with personal health. And a lot of people go plant-based or vegan maybe because there's a health condition that they have learned can be improved by eating plant-based.
Right.
That might be whole foods plant-based, or that might still include some meat substitutes or plant-based substitutes in general. So in this conversation, if something only applies or mainly applies to whole food plant-based, we will be really careful to specify that.
Right.
But thankfully, the faux meats aren't as bad as people like to say they are. And so you can still, include them if you want to.
Yes. I know several dietitians that are all about including faux meats.
And not as only a transition food.
No.
We're 4 years in and we still eat the faux meats because there are some times that they just really help take a veganized comfort food to the next level.
Right.
So we still do that.
Yeah.
So the first thing is dietary cholesterol.
Yeah. Specifically speaking, in terms of health, I like to talk about cholesterol kind of right up front because it's such a compelling reason for me to switch to plant-based diets, because cholesterol does not exist in plant-based foods. It just does not exist. The only way to have cholesterol in your diet is to eat foods that come from animals. Cholesterol is not an essential nutrient. We do not need to consume it. Our bodies produce all of the cholesterol that we need.
And that's why it's so compelling, because our bodies produce everything that we need as far as cholesterol. Anything you consume and put into your body is extra. And that's where you get the buildup and the issues with cholesterol that we see in society.
Absolutely. So even the most unhealthy vegan foods you can find, they're cholesterol free. The second main thing about personal health I like to talk about is trans fat. And the reason that this always jumps out to me is because when I was taking nutrition classes in college and as part of my studies for my fitness certifications, trans fat comes up a lot because it's something you want to avoid. It's something you don't need. It's something that you want zero of in your diet, right? And when you talk about sources of trans fat, textbooks, lecturers, every class I've ever taken, they all
I remember you
cite,
telling me this.
yeah, it's all about processed foods, hydrogenated oils.
They don't specify where trans fat sort of quote unquote naturally occurs, right?
No,
They
it's
just
all
talk
about the process of chemically altering oils.
Right.
Yeah, one day I was listening to a speech about why you should go vegan, and somebody talked about cutting trans fats out of your diet. And I was like, wait.
hold up.
I've taken lots of nutrition classes. I've been to so many lectures. No one's ever said that meat has trans fat in it, ever in my life. So I looked it up, and my mind was blown. And I realized the only way to cut trans fat out of your diet is to go vegan.
Now let's talk here. Whole Foods plant-based vegan
Yes.
is the only way to truly cut it out, right? Because there are some processed vegan foods that may still have it.
Right.
Those would be like the replacement butters, right?
Yeah. So a lot of butters that are accidentally
And
vegan.
because hydrogenated oils do what now?
They make fat into a solid at room temperature.
And so the margarines, the butters and stuff, that makes sense that there would still be some trans fat in those.
That's kind of the difference between Crisco shortening and Crisco oil. The shortening is hydrogenated oil, so it has the same consistency of lard.
Yeah.
And so forth. So yeah, you do, if you want to cut trans fat out of your diet, you need to cut
Processed foods.
those products out of your diet as well. That's not hard to do because you just read the food label.
And what about the faux meats and the faux cheeses?
Typically those are trans fat free.
Okay.
And those are foods that require a food label. And
so you can check.
They're required to tell you how much trans fat is in a food.
So, and because the FDA, this whole thing with trans fat was really interesting because the FDA doesn't have a maximum amount that is technically okay. Like they have a maximum amount for sodium. They have a daily recommended value for sodium, but they don't have that for trans fat.
Right. So they can't set a limit. They can't set a number and say, if you have this much trans fat every day,
it's healthy and okay to have this amount.
Right. They can't set that amount. To me, that says there's no safe amount of trans fat to have. So I interpret that as my diet should be trans fat free or as trans fat free as possible.
Yeah.
And the only way for me to do that is just off the top to eliminate all animal products.
Yeah.
So trans fat is a big one that it really convinces me that plant-based is the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one that sticks out to me is the fact that a whole foods plant-based diet is the only diet that has been clinically proven to reverse heart disease without medication.
Yeah.
That whole sentence. Let that sink in.
Yeah, the whole sentence. It's so impressive.
Right.
Only diet clinically proven to reverse heart disease without medication.
So people argue about what's the best diet to build muscle, to prevent diabetes, to lose weight, to do all these different things.
What's a heart healthy diet?
Yeah. Or let me put my diet against your diet and see which one does better. But show me another diet that can reverse heart disease without medication. And I'll look into it.
Yeah.
Until then, plant-based.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right.
It's pretty impressive.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then plant-based eating also is really helpful with diabetes, which I think most people don't think about because everybody thinks sugar and carbs when they think about diabetes.
Right.
And so tell us more.
Right. So the reason sugar is so associated with diabetes because diabetes causes high blood sugar. Right. That's one of the
effects of diabetes.
The symptoms of diabetes. But the cause of diabetes is insulin resistance. So when your cells cannot use insulin to get the sugar into the cells, right? So that's what causes diabetes is insulin resistance. And the way you get insulin resistance is having too much fat.
It's so fascinating to me how it's this fat, and I imagine trans fat is going to be implicated here.
Trans fat is huge.
We're coming up on that.
Saturated fat.
Yeah.
And just animal fats in general, animal proteins. The more animal foods you have, the higher your risk of diabetes because it causes that insulin resistance.
Which then causes the blood sugar.
Which then causes the sugar to build up in your blood because it can't get into your cells.
Yeah. So it's a much different cycle than like, oh, don't eat that sugar.
Right. Eating the sugar is not going to, in and of itself, necessarily cause insulin resistance.
Mm-hmm.
It spikes your blood sugar for a second. Your insulin does its thing, goes into your cells. Now, repetitive consumption of that sugar
Right. You are adding
gets
more
there.
to the blood system,
Yeah.
but really it's the fat.
Yeah.
I've heard something about just like one serving of meat a day.
Right. So one serving of meat per day increases diabetes risk by 19%.
And one serving is very small. That's like the palm of your hand, not your fingers and your whole hand, just the little palm of your hand.
Just the palm. Or the size of a deck of cards.
A deck of cards.
3 ounces of meat is what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
and people don't eat just 3 ounces of meat. Think about like when you go to a restaurant. What do they give you? I don't even remember how big they are. 10-ounce ribeyes? I don't even know anymore.
I think
so
10
long.
ounces of small ribeye.
That might be.
That's like the small scale.
I don't
and that's
know.
3 times.
But yeah.
That's 3 servings of meat.
Jeez.
Yeah. I don't know what size ribeyes are anymore.
It's been so long.
But yeah, so just one serving the size of a deck of cards.
Híjole, that's a lot.
Yeah. And then with personal health, I mean, going deeper than just the nutrients and the things we're talking about, you hear lots of stories about how people have lost weight, have reversed their diabetes, they feel better, all these sorts of things. For me personally, cutting out meat was really helpful in losing lots of weight and keeping it off.
Yeah.
And curing my GERD,
Yes.
gastroesophageal reflux disease, which
bad.
was a nightmare and is not a nightmare anymore. And then going vegan, you saw in me too, such improvements in my asthma and allergies.
Yeah.
Seasonal allergies improved a ton. And then my athletic performance improved drastically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our next topic is animal protection or
animal welfare, animal rights. People word it different ways, but for some people, their reason is for the animals.
Mm-hmm.
And for us individually, this is what turned into our main reason.
Yeah.
Our reason started for health.
Yeah, our research started for health and trying to understand what is really a healthy way to live.
And then
in that rabbit hole, we discovered the true conditions of factory farming. And that's our why, our main why. And that's what keeps us vegan. Partly because pigs, cows, chickens, they're all social, complex creatures. They're sentient. They feel. They have families. They have relationships.
Right.
All of that. And once you really start to know that.
And really let it sink in. It's just not worth it for the taste, for the convenience. I was going to say I'll cheat on my diet, but I'll never cheat on the animals.
Oh, I love that.
I'll eat junk food if it's vegan. Try not to overdo it, obviously. But, I try to eat healthy. That doesn't keep me being, vegan. But I will not indulge in something that's not vegan.
Yeah. Well, and that's how I knew it stuck for me, is when I looked at a Reese's peanut butter cup and was like, I see the cow with the milk. I'm done. So now I make my own that are vegan and I'm good to go. But the other thing too that people don't realize is that they're all really intelligent. Like pigs have been equated to being as intelligent as young children, like 3 and 4 year olds.
Right. And I've seen them playing video games.
That's crazy.
Pigs can play video games if you give them a joystick. They don't have thumbs, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, they can play video games and better than young kids.
That's so crazy. And I've seen where chickens can do memory games. And they do that.
And they can adjust the thermostat to meet their
That's my
comfort
buddy.
levels.
It's my buddies. Anyway, yeah. And so, you get to, once you start to really understand that they, in many ways, they're very similar in that aspect to dogs and cats.
Right.
And we hear about dog meat markets in other countries and people are horrified, but they're not quite horrified about what's happening to the animals that we typically consume and eat. And for us, we were able to equate those things, see cows and pigs and chickens the same way we see dogs and cats and other like wild animals that people tend to want to save. And it just made sense.
Right.
It clicked for us.
Right. For sure. And a quote that really sticks out to me that I've seen floating around social media is, if a slaughter was really humane, it would be the farmers showing footage of it, not animal activists.
There wouldn't be ag-gag laws then either.
Right. It
Because
wouldn't be a crime to show what happens behind closed doors in slaughterhouses.
Right. Yeah, because the people who sort of get this footage and then make it public could go to jail in many states for many, many years. It's incredible.
Right. So if it was even remotely close to as humane, safe, normal as they want you to think it was, they would show you. They would say, look, it's not that bad, see?
Yeah, exactly. There wouldn't be anything to expose.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing that always made an impact for us too is how animal agriculture contributes to the deforestation of wild spaces on the planet, because we've got the Amazon being torn down so that they can grow soybeans, and 80% of those soybeans goes to feed animals.
Right.
Not for human consumption.
So, in that point, with deforestation, animal agriculture or just meat production is the leading cause of species extinction. So we're causing species to go extinct because of deforestation, because of pollution, drought, impacting the air quality and the water quality with concentrated animal feeding operations.
Yeah. And I mean, in the Amazon, that's been described as the lungs of the planet.
Right.
It's so important.
Yeah.
So.
And we're just wreaking havoc on it. Now, some people will say, well, we have to clear land to grow all the food that all you vegans eat, right? Well, you have to clear land either way. You either have to grow plant foods for humans to eat, or you have to grow plant foods for animals to eat.
Yeah. Well, so you're using twice as much land, really. And we'll talk more about this.
Or more than twice as much
a little bit later in our next topic. But it's just you're clearing land to grow crops to feed animals that are also on land being cleared.
Right.
So
when you really think about it, that argument doesn't hold water.
Yeah.
And then we have good old Wildlife Services, which is a federally funded program where they go in and just will indiscriminately kill wildlife to protect livestock. So a farmer having issues with coyotes bugging his dairy cows, he can just call up Wildlife Services. They'll go out and kill some coyotes.
Now, some people would argue, well, that's okay because, well, one, we need the meat, but we're not even going to go there. Overpopulation of these wildlife animals and all of that.
Right, but what they don't know or don't realize is that indiscriminately killing coyotes actually has the reverse effect and causes more overpopulation of coyotes. Because coyotes, when they feel the loss, they know when they're being killed, they will reproduce at faster rates, causing overpopulation.
Wow.
Like the overpopulation is human caused. Mother Nature knows how to regulate these things.
Yeah.
That's why lions didn't take over a whole continent.
Right.
Because it balances itself out.
Yeah.
But when humans come in, then not so much.
Yeah.
So, the meat production is impacting all animals all over the planet, all wildlife.
Yeah.
Everyone, including humans, which we'll get to in just a few.
Yeah.
And then just the myths that go along with it. There's the humane myth. People think about, well, I only eat humane meat.
Right.
And then I like to really just think about what that means. Let's dig deeper. When something's labeled humane, what does that mean? There's not specific guidelines about what that means.
So for all of these labels, humane, free range, cage free, right? We'll talk a little bit about each of those. Does the FDA have any standards for any of them that they have to be met in order to have those labels? Or are they all just industry applied labels?
Well, there are some guidelines or restrictions to meet them, but they're vaguely worded.
So they can be worked around to provide the least amount possible while still having these labels.
Exactly. So, for example, free range. It's worded in such a way so all it means is that they need to have access to an outdoor space.
Gotcha.
So you could have,
but there's no requirement for how big that space needs to be per number of animals.
Right.
Like
exactly.
per 100 chickens, there needs to be 15 square feet.
Right. None of that. None of that. So you
So
can
you
cram
can-
a bunch of chickens in a little warehouse and put a little door with a little patch of dirt that
And they're still
90% of
free-range.
them will never even see because they can't get out
Logistically
there.
get out there, yeah.
The door gets crammed and backed up. There's not enough space outside for all the chickens to be outside at once, or even a fraction of all the chickens to be outside at once. And they get to label that free range. So what we think of when we see the label free range and what happens in reality
Are two different things.
are
Vastly different.
so far
Yeah.
away from each
Well,
other.
and I think a lot of people with cage free tend to also picture what they imagine for free range.
Right.
Whereas cage free just means they're not stacked in cages, but that doesn't mean that they are not still in cramped, unsanitary, dark, damp, inhumane conditions.
Right. They could still be crammed in a little warehouse on top of each other, even their own feces, blistered feet, not able to walk, stressed out beyond imagination, all of that stuff. And it's labeled cage free to make consumers feel like they're making
a good choice,
compassionate,
a better choice, yeah.
better, more sustainable
Yeah.
choice, whatever people are looking for. And it's just not the case. It's
Right.
a trick.
Well, and here's the thing too, is even if a chicken or a cow is in the absolute most idyllic conditions for their life, and they are fed a natural diet and they have access to outside, they could live in the absolute most idyllic conditions.
Right.
They still have to be slaughtered for people to eat them. They still have to be killed.
Right.
And the majority of the way animals are quote unquote processed is by slicing their throat first.
Right.
And that doesn't sound humane. I don't know how you word that sentence so it sounds humane.
How do you humanely slit someone's throat?
Right. Like,
And add to that they're slaughtered so early in their life expectancy.
Yes. Cows can live 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years is their natural life expectancy.
And dairy cows are slaughtered somewhere around 5 years after the mama cow can no longer produce milk. So she has been forcibly impregnated, and then her baby's taken from her, hooked up to machines to take her milk, and then when she's not producing enough milk anymore, she goes to slaughter. And so she lives, I think, longer than most other cattle, and she lives a whopping 5 years.
She lives out about 25% of her
Expected life.
natural life expectancy, and that's the longest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So other, like beef cattle, get slaughtered between 1.5 to 2 years old.
They're babies still.
Babies.
They're
when
huge,
their expectancy is 20 years.
but they're babies.
Yeah. Oh, we get them to grow huge in those 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
So I don't care how well you treated a cow. I don't care if you cradle them and rock them to bed at night. If you kill them when they're 5 years old, that is not humane by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, it's very hard to go there, to go
It's
to humane when they're so young still. 18 months? Oh my gosh.
Really hard for me
No.
to
5
even
years
imagine
old?
that it's
Jeez.
humane or normal or anything of the sort. So just those myths, right?
Yeah.
So animal protection, it's a huge reason
Yeah.
to switch to a plant-based diet. The next topic is the environment. This became a big one for us as well, because when you really learn about how our food choices
Oh my
impact
gosh.
the environment, it's really another compelling reason that it's the only way to go.
Yeah, I was really shook and really frustrated with myself, thinking that I was somebody who cared about the environment and cared about the planet my whole life. This is a thing that people have known about me my whole life.
Right.
I'm into the earth, I'm into planet, and want to save it, and pollution and recycle and all this other stuff. And I knew nothing about animal agriculture's effect on the environment.
When you look at the data,
Oh my.
switching to a plant-based diet is the most impactful action an individual can take to protect the environment, because you're decreasing your greenhouse gas emissions, decreasing land use and water use, and improving air quality and water quality.
That's a lot of aspects of environmental health to have an impact on.
Right. You can use energy efficient appliances and energy efficient light bulbs and unplug your appliances and bike to work
And all of that
and
is
do
great.
all these things, which are wonderful, wonderful things. and you still won't even have the impact as switching to a plant-based diet.
That's incredible. Well, and part of it is because 51% of greenhouse gas emissions come from animal agriculture.
Right.
So everybody talks about the car usage and having fossil fuels. That's 49%. Now that is a lot. That is a lot, but it's not the majority.
Right.
And there's this whole hidden, like, you need to pull back that curtain on the Wizard of Oz. That's what I feel like needs to happen around greenhouse gas emissions.
Right. Yes.
Because it's hidden. Like, people
hidden.
are not processing
We could
this.
take every single plane, train, and automobile out of commission and still not decrease our greenhouse gas emissions as much as if we switch to plant-based diets.
It's incredible. So let's talk. We alluded to it before about the acreage and how much land you need to make all the food we vegans eat versus, cattle production.
Right.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
So 1.5 acres of land can produce 375 pounds of meat. The same amount of land can produce 37,000 pounds of plant-based food. So
Sorry, my mouth is kind of open
jaw-dropping.
right now.
It is
No,
literally
because
jaw-dropping.
I knew it was ridiculously different. You know what I mean? Like, I knew it was a lot, but I didn't know specific numbers. It's been a while since I've done that reading. That is huge.
And when you think about it,
because you could feed so many more people.
yeah, and that's another topic to touch on in just a minute. So
That's huge.
for the environment, to help preserve land, water, all of it,
Plant-based.
plant-based, 91% of deforestation is because of livestock.
Yeah. That's
91%. Yeah, let's shift
That's
gears.
wild.
So we talked about the three main ones that people mainly cite. Either it's health, it's the animals, or it's the environment.
and these are the ones that you can pretty easily find books and documentaries on. And are pretty easy to link, the benefits of being plant-based to these three
Right.
things.
So next, I want to talk about social justice. And this is a really big one for me.
Yeah.
And has become over the years that I don't know why it's not included as the fourth. Like, people talk about the 3 reasons. I'm like, actually, let's make it 4. Because social justice is just as pressing an issue and just as compelling of a reason to switch to a plant-based diet.
Yes.
And because right off the bat, working in a meat processing plant is the most dangerous job in America.
Yes, you heard that. You did hear that correctly. It's not, skyscraper construction worker or, on a highway road. It is working in a meat processing
You're
plant.
so much more likely to lose a limb or a life working in a meat processing plant.
And that's because the rate at which they're expected to, quote unquote, process the meat is so fast
Right.
that accidents happen quickly. And just the aspect, too, of who needs to work in a meat processing plant because of access or job availability or skills or education. How some, lower socioeconomic status or people who are really struggling are in many ways sort of preyed upon by these companies to come work in a meat processing plant. I think a lot of them are undocumented immigrants.
Well, they target undocumented folks.
They target,
for sure.
they target undocumented immigrants. And then there's been some implications where some of these processing plants almost make deals with ICE.
And they love to target people who are undocumented because they can't advocate for themselves.
Right.
They can't advocate for rights or workman's comp or sick leave or
any typical benefits that you would get at a regular job.
yeah, if you get your finger sliced off on the job,
Workman's comp.
they have to provide benefits to you.
Right.
But if you're undocumented,
They
you can't
don't.
advocate for that.
You're right.
And they can pay you less.
Mm-hmm.
They can force you to do things that you shouldn't be forced to do.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you speak up too much, they'll just have you deported. It's maddening. Just that whole industry and disproportionately affecting people who are undocumented, people of color, low SES.
Because
people.
the majority of concentrated animal feedings and processing plants are in low SES, socioeconomic status areas.
Right.
And a lot of these places will also pollute the surrounding city.
Right. Well, they have no choice when you put that many pigs or cows or chickens
Yeah.
in that small of a space,
They're going to produce a lot of
the
poop.
air is just going to be atrocious. And then they have to dump the waste somewhere.
Yeah.
So they just let it off into the water.
Yeah. Or they'll try to like supposedly have those lagoons and stuff, but maybe they're not, maybe they're leaching.
Yeah.
And
it's going to find its way into the
the
water.
And there's some studies being done where it shows up in the health of the community.
Right. You see
being affected.
Extremely higher rates of asthma,
Mm-hmm.
cancers, birth defects. And people have a really hard time advocating for change because they don't have resources.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the money to fight it.
Right. Or if they try to fight it, they're going to lose jobs and an economy in their town. It's so tricky.
And this reason alone made me feel like I'm vegan. Even if you change my mind about everything else, this keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
The systemic racism within the food system.
Yeah. And then I alluded to it earlier, but world hunger.
Right.
World hunger. I mean, we talked about how much produce, plant-based food can be made on 1.5 acres. Could you imagine if we own the majority of concentrated animal feeding operations just switched to plant-based foods?
Right. So the world's farmers produce enough plant-based foods to feed 1.5 times the world's population.
1.5 times.
We could feed 1.5. We could
feed everybody on the planet. Nobody on this planet has to be hungry.
And then some. Yet over 840 million people experience chronic hunger. And even more, that's not counting the people who experience food insecurity and undernourishment.
So here's an interesting thing. 'Cause people talk about the overpopulation of the planet all the time, right? And then now we're recording this at the time of coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, the pandemic. We're recording during the pandemic.
Right.
And one of the things that I've learned is that the United States no longer keeps a stockpile of wheat. Like we have stockpiles of PPEs have been an issue.
Mm-hmm.
We used to keep stockpiles of food on hand. We don't do that anymore. We haven't done that for a number of years. So if we were doing the world's farmers produce enough plant-based foods to feed 1.5 times the world's population, that means we could feed every single person and create a stockpile.
Yep.
So that in something like this, a pandemic or an epidemic in some area where the food supply chain becomes compromised in some way and getting food to people is an issue, you've got that stockpile all ready to go.
Yep. Instead, we're in this terrible situation of humans, getting sick because they're working in such close quarters in such dangerous situations to process meat, to kill the animals, to do all those things. And now we either have to disrupt that to save their lives, which we obviously should,
right,
or force them to go to work so we can have meat in the grocery stores and on our plates.
So back to the social justice.
Social justice. Yeah.
Oh, we're still in social justice.
No, yeah. So it's a huge social justice issue, but that's a perfect segue into the next main topic, which is public health.
Yeah.
And if you're not, if folks aren't concerned with your personal health quite as much, but public health should be on everybody's radar, hopefully.
Because it really, I think this is a topic that people don't know a lot about and hasn't been a mainstream topic, but it sure is right now.
Right. Yeah. All of a sudden, we're all talking about public health.
Everybody's an epidemiologist now.
And it's a big topic, especially in the vegan communities now with COVID-19 so prevalent, is zoonotic diseases and how, a disease can jump species from animals to humans. And in order for that to happen, they need to be in close quarters.
Yes.
The animals and the humans need to be in close quarters. And the more jam-packed they're in, the more bad the conditions are, the more likely that is to happen.
Yeah. So do you know what's interesting is this is a main topic area where a couple of our other topics coincide because we have the environment. We're encroaching on these animals' lands and deforesting them to plant stuff, right? So, and we're causing species extinction while we do that.
Right.
Okay. And then these animals are raised or the wild animals are in close proximity to farm animals and jumps species and then jumps to humans, or goes from wild to human because of this encroachment or because of factory farming, or the wet markets.
Right.
And wet markets are where there's live animals, whether farm or wild in some countries, and somebody goes in and they buy the animal, and the farmer, I guess, is what they're called.
The vendor.
The vendor, okay, slaughters the animal right there.
Right.
For them. So we've got animal welfare, the environment, public health, and usually these wet markets were originally created for poor people to have a means of eating and making money. So under public health and these zoonotic diseases, jumping species, you can tie in some of these other ones that we've just talked about.
Right. And that, I mean, it speaks to how all of these issues tie into each other.
They all correlate.
And so if anybody goes vegan or switches to a plant-based diet for just one reason,
you have all these other reasons.
You're affecting all the other reasons, having all these beautiful side effects.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
These very positive side effects because they all coincide and all work together. Mm-hmm. The same diet that'll help you lower your cholesterol is the same diet that'll help you save the environment.
Yeah.
The same diet that'll help improve public health. Because now, okay, there's zoonotic diseases. There's COVID-19 and all the other zoonotic diseases, you know, swine flu, bird flu, HIV. We could go on and on.
Yeah, which all have an effect on our public health systems.
Right.
Which then affect everybody as well.
Right.
Okay. But then also consuming animal products and animal meats contributes to diabetes, heart disease, strokes, cancer, which also are public health concerns.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, the diet-related diseases that we talked about early on in personal health, it's a public health issue, right? The famous quote in public health, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yep.
We're always spending time trying to find a cure for diabetes, a cure for cancer,
a cure for heart disease.
Yeah. What medications can we come out with to lower people's blood pressure? Whereas we could prevent all of that.
Yeah.
By eating whole foods, plant-based diet.
Yeah.
And the money that would be saved, the strain on our resources to treat all of these conditions.
Absolutely.
It goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And then lastly, with public health, and this is perhaps even the scariest or the most compelling part, is the antibiotic use in livestock.
Yeah. I think it's starting to seep. It's starting to get into mainstream, but it is really... it's a really big issue.
It is serious.
Yeah.
So I want to quote Dr. Greger from nutritionfacts.org. He said, when animals receive unnecessary antibiotics, bacteria can become resistant to the drugs, then travel on meat to the store and end up causing hard-to-treat illnesses in people. You were an infection control nurse. Can you break that down a little bit?
I can try.
Talk about it.
So,
take us deeper.
So antibiotics are, you get strep throat. It's caused by a bacteria, and you're given an antibiotic to kill the bacteria, and then you get better.
Right.
Well, it's the same thing in animals at factory farms. They get sick with bacteria also.
Right.
And they are also given antibiotics. But sometimes they're given antibiotics to prevent infection, not just when they get infection, because the amount of animals that are in a concentrated animal farming operation is so vast that it's very difficult for one vet, one farmer, or whoever, the people to animal ratio is so big that one person can't keep an eye on every single animal to keep them from getting sick. So they use antibiotics to
easier to
prevent.
Just pump some antibiotics in their feed.
So then what happens is bacteria and viruses change. They can change. And they can it's adapting.
And they become resistant.
They become resistant
to the antibiotic drugs.
Yeah, to whatever you have. And so we are quickly running out of effective antibiotics to be able to treat ourselves from these things. And that was a huge, before antibiotics and penicillin and everything, bacterial infections was a leading cause of death across all of human history. And
Right.
we're talking like childbirth, you get a little cut and it gets infected. Like it can get really, it could get really
We
ugly.
really take for granted what antibiotics do
Yes.
for us in
Yeah.
this world.
And we've now abused them so much that we are having problems.
And I've heard experts say at the rate we're going, we're looking at a possible future that is the pre-antibiotic
Yeah.
era.
Yep.
We're looking at a future where a cut could kill you.
Yeah.
And it's because of pumping the antibiotics into animals that we then eat.
Then
This is a public health nightmare that
Yeah.
not nearly enough people are talking about.
Yeah.
And so some people will, I feel like we've covered so many different topics.
Yeah.
And people like to try to poke holes or find loopholes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So while I'll just eat the antibiotic-free, free
Cage
range,
free. Yep.
cage-free,
Grass,
humane,
human raised.
organic,
Yeah.
grass-fed meat,
Yeah.
will be like, well, reference that part of our podcast where we talked about life expectancy of
Soup
cows.
Yeah.
And where we talked about how the cow was killed
Mm-hmm.
and how there's trans fat in the flesh and cholesterol. Like,
yeah.
there's no foolproof way except the plant-based diet.
Yeah. And I think, too, the other thing is some people will continue to try to poke holes and challenge you. And sometimes I get tired and I'm just like, look, this is the choice I made because I actually have a choice in this time of human history. I don't have to participate in harming animals and destroying the planet because it comes down to that is what is happening.
Absolutely.
You know, you can't quite deny the difference in the planet and what you can produce. People might try. This is where you can provide whatever information you have and is pertinent to you. And some people will still be defensive about it and still try to poke holes. And it just comes down to, this is the choice I want to make. I'm answering your question. I'm not trying to convince you to be vegan. I'm not trying to convince you to be plant-based. And don't try to convince me to eat meat.
Because I'll tell you why.
Just be confident in your choice.
Right.
You know, it's some people are really not good with conflict or confrontation, and some people will really challenge you and it'll feel like it's heading that way. And if you're not comfortable with continuing the conversation, just be confident in your choice.
Yeah. And one response that I like to use when people try to poke holes and I don't have the energy to give a dissertation on the spot.
Yes.
You know, I'll just, one thing that I say to a lot of times is, it's not about causing no harm. It's about causing the least amount of harm.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Because, people can say, but the water for almonds and but clearing land for your lettuce killed a rabbit like throw all that stuff at me. And my big giant shield is, it's not about perfection.
Yes.
It's about harm reduction.
Yeah.
So because all of these compelling reasons, we ourselves ended up going vegan overnight.
Yes.
So we'll share with you how we went vegan overnight.
Yeah. Besides the compelling reasons, our youngest son was really on board pretty quickly. And overnight it was.
Yeah. So we weren't quite prepared to go overnight, but he made us so we can share with you how we did that.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about if you're not an overnighter kind of person, how you can space it out. And we'll explore lots of different ways to switch to a plant-based diet.
Whether it's overnight or you need quote unquote baby steps, we will discuss those.
We got you covered.
Yeah.
So keep tuning in and we'll see you next time on Teach Me How to Vegan. Thanks for tuning in. For more resources, recipes, information, you can visit our website at apnm.org/plant-based. You can also email us with questions, comments, feedback, plantbased@apnm.org.
Catch you next time.